Welcome back to More Than a Game, a podcast dedicated to the Premier League, the A-League and more. Today on the show, the Reds and the Wanderers make it rain goals as Brisbane, Perth and Newey continue to slide. Fulham still can't put their heads above water and Newcastle sink further. And our mouths are watering as the UCL quarterfinal draw is set. I'm Colby. I'm joined by Damo once again. And as we welcome back to the pod, Shanen, back by popular demand. Shanen, I'll start with you. We had some good feedback after last time you were on the pod. Still query whether these were your burner accounts or what, but people got in our mentions, people got in our emails saying that they wanted to see you back on. So welcome back.
Thanks for having me. I don't know who's wanting me back, but thank you for those people who are wanting me back as well.
And
we ask ourselves that every week.
Yeah. And back whether we want him or not, we've got Damo. Damo, how are you, mate? How are you tonight?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. A little bit dusty. Had a 30th birthday yesterday, so recovering.
I see you've got that influencer lighting again, Damo. It doesn't matter what time of the day it is. You've always got the right setup here. And, if listeners ever want to check you out, you can jump onto our YouTube stream that we post links to before the pods come out. But Shanen, just before we really kick it all off, last time you were on the pod, you gave us a few choice words about your views of Melbourne City and Paddy Kisnorbo and how he's going. I just wondered whether you wanted to give us an update on your views, seeing as there wasn't a Melbourne City game to talk about in this weekend's A-League. Give us your latest views.
Well, the views still haven't changed. The only thing I will say differently is now I can say that they are getting the results. So I don't have to say they're not getting the results. And I'm pretty sure they've won every single game since I was on the pod. So, yeah.
Very convincingly as well.
Paddy Kisnorbo might have to send me some thank you flowers or something, because maybe I'm the good luck charm.
A little bouquet for Shanen. I think Paddy could arrange that. I don't think that's too much to ask. But let's kick off, boys, with our moments of the week. Damo, what stood out for you this week?
My moment of the week this week, I'm going to Japan. I like to take my moments around the world. It happened a couple of days ago. Yokohama were playing, and Ange Postecoglou went on a rant at the referee for a decision that he made. And
I know his
translator came over and directly translated what Ange said to the referee. And so the referee booked the translator, which I thought was great. And Ange kind of just shuffled him back off behind and was like, "Oh, go and sit down. We're all good."
That's so good. You could just get a new translator every week, couldn't you? Yeah. Just like blow up and get your translator to take the fall for you.
I thought it was great because the translator, you could see his actions. He's like, "What, me?" And then he points to Ange like, "He said it." Ange's like, "No, go away."
Oh, it's like a free hit as well, isn't it? Like, you get to have your rage and get away with it. So, Shanen, what about you, mate? What have you had your eye on this week?
I don't know if you boys follow the NPL at all, but my moment of the week was probably some of the quality broadcasting they had. They had one game where half the screen was covered by a tree, and another game where half the screen was covered by the dugout bench. So, yeah, it's just quality broadcasting from the NPL.
We've got an own goal section, right?
Oh, okay. Well, I might just have to reuse that for the own goal section.
No, that's good. I love putting like shithousery stuff and like just really like dodgy stuff as my moments of the week as well. One in particular that I would say, like, sometimes they're a bit of a slashy. Like, you could have them as an own goal or a moment of the week. And yeah, go on.
People say peak A-League all the time. I tell you what, you've got to watch.
That's right.
Yeah. It's like A-League times 10.
So yeah, mine straddles that line a little bit as well. It was Joe Hart's social media after Tottenham's 3-0 shock defeat in the Europa League to Dinamo Zagreb. Joe Hart's Insta story just posted a picture of the result and just job done, tick next to it. I think in anticipation of it just being a win. Apparently Joe was asleep at the time and sort of said the next day that this was the first he'd heard about it, and they just thought that the social media manager just thought it was a win. But not sure how you could think that, but he's really just thrown his social media intern under the bus. But I like moment of the week for sure, because just some of the responses to it were hilarious.
Yeah, it was great. That was actually on my list for one of my own goals. But like you said, Colby, there's a lot of crossover in our own goals and moment of the week. It's very fluid.
And I can't mention this game without mentioning all the banter that was coming out on social media after it. Like Twitter just went crazy after this result because Dinamo Zagreb's manager apparently went to prison shortly before the game. I don't know whether it was actually for fraud, but who cares? It made the banter a lot better, even if it was true or not. That's what everyone was saying. And I'll read out a few of the choice tweets that we were sharing around the group chat. One said, Dinamo Zagreb's manager used his one phone call from prison to say, "Lads, it's Tottenham." Another one was, "Can't believe Jose has come across yet another group of players who can't or won't follow instructions. The guy just has no luck." And the final one that I thought was particularly funny was, "Dinamo manager in prison for fraud, yet Mourinho is allowed to walk the streets. They got the wrong guy." Unbelievable. You just love to see it. But things you didn't love to see, or you thought were even worse than your moments of the week, Damo.
I mean, we talk about this way too often, but there was obviously the incident with racism again in the Europa League, and everything that's coming about that now. It was Rangers, and someone was accused of saying it, and now they're apparently taking legal action because some of the players assaulted him after the game or something like that. So it's an ugly situation. It always is when something like this happens, and more often than not, we kind of get no resolution out of this stuff. So it's always an own goal when that happens.
Yeah, I had that down as well, Damo, and it's just I just don't know how many times we can just be completely outraged and disgusted by this kind of stuff. I hope we all would, and I'd encourage any of our listeners, if they're at games and they see this kind of behavior carrying on, to just call it out. Basically, I think that's the only thing that people really can do. I mean, that's the fans in the stands, but when it happens on field and it's a player to player kind of thing, and just really malicious, kind of this incident just looked really malicious. This player got in Glenn Kamara's ear and put his hand, cupped his hand over his mouth. It looked like a completely premeditated thing, and you could tell from Kamara's reaction what the sort of nature of the comment was. And then to come out and try and deny it. And we're still waiting to see what action, if any, UEFA will take. But, we've seen how they treat these kinds of incidents in the past. So not holding out any high hope. And that's the real worrying side of this, I think. So I mean that was my own goal as well, Damo. So I'll throw to Shanen. Hit us with your own goal this week.
Well, I kind of ruined a good one on the week. So I can be a bit harsh and say Nigel Bogard in the last match. He was just absolutely horrendous. You know what I mean? So to lighten it up, I might just take the piss out of Bogard.
Man's washed.
Mate, he's been washed for the last 5 years. I don't know how he's still playing.
I mean, I think Topple Stanley spared his blushes in a few games, but yeah, when he has to do any kind of defending himself, he seems to just want to kick lumps out of guys, and that's, you always see that when players sort of get past their peak in terms of their physicality, and they're frustrated with their body not being able to do what it once did, and you see them get frustrated and just kick out at players who they sort of can't keep a handle on, and that's what we saw that tonight a little bit, I think, from him and many of the other players, to be fair, in the Newcastle team, getting frustrated with the way Adelaide were running around. But we will talk about that match in more detail. It's obviously just concluded as we're coming to record the pod tonight. But we've got a few news items and a listener question that we put out on social media to chat through as well. First item, there's been a bit of chat about the potential new A-League broadcast deal this week. with the APL apparently keen to stick to the summer season now because they've had some broadcaster interest with that, as opposed to switch to winter, which we've been talking about for years and looked like it was almost certainly going to happen. It's a U-turn from that position that I guess the FA had really been pushing for those past couple of years. And I think Stan and Amazon are the front runners. I guess we're hearing, the deal's supposed to be worth a lot more than previous broadcast deals, so you could see why they might want to take it and give in to those demands. But what are your thoughts on this, boys?
I think I read an article in the Sydney Morning Herald a couple of days ago that laid out how many players were off contract at the end of this season from A-League clubs, and it's kind of coming off the back of this broadcasting this year. I think that's actually a business decision on all of the club's parts. They've only got the key players of their squad contracted further than this season, because who knows what the new broadcast deal was going to be? Who knows what the salary cap was going to be, if there was going to be a salary cap? So 70% of A-League players are off contract at the end of this season, which means next year could be a lot of change up, a lot of players going to and from clubs. It's partly exciting that there's going to be a lot of change and it's going to be very unpredictable, but it's also a little bit annoying that it's just that carousel of player transfers around A-League clubs that aren't really transfers. It's, the mutual termination and join another club 2 days later. But I mean, it's the broadcast deal itself it's got to be exciting. I think from what I understand, Stan's the front runner, which is good that the Socceroos, the Matildas, the W League is all going to be involved in the deal. And, there's free-to-air games involved as well, just a lot like the rugby. And I think, as we've seen with the rugby, and I'm not sure if you guys are rugby fans, that Stan have heavily promoted their own platform, Stan Sport, with the rugby images and with, sponsored content on social media. So because it's their only sport and football would only be their second, the A-League, you would imagine there'd be a lot more promotion of the A-League than there is with Fox now. So that can only be a good thing.
Shanen, what have you made of all of this? The potential to sort of backflip and go back to a summer season for the sake of the broadcast dollars. Are you in favour of that? What are your feelings?
Well, this season, I don't think I'm wrong in saying this, or alone, has probably been some of the most exciting football we've seen from the A-League in history. And it's no surprise that it's the only season that the A-League's been more in winter. So I think the quality and the excitement factor of football will go backwards if we move back into summer, because players can't realistically play in the 40-degree Australian heat in Perth. That's just not realistic. But for the broadcast deal, I would be stoked if Stan got it. First of all, Fox Sports don't advertise the league enough. You can tell they don't really care anymore. And secondly, it needs to be more accessible, to be honest. The fact that it was on Fox Sports the whole time since its start has made it one of those things where a lot of lower income households are just pretty much unaccessible for them. Lately, they've got one game a week, but that's not really good enough to get people hooked into it, and it's just kind of not really setting the league up to succeed if we're just going to keep doing it with Fox Sports. So yeah, I think Stan's probably, I'm not going to say it's going to be perfect because I don't know enough about Stan, but at least they're going to try. Fox Sports aren't really trying, so I'm all for it, but just not for the summer move.
Yeah, I think the biggest part of that that moving to Stan, if that comes true, is that it encompasses all, the A-League, W League, Matildas, and Socceroos. And Stan is owned by Channel 9, so they've got 4 free-to-air channels that they can use to play games. And with the rugby, they're playing at least one free-to-air game a week, plus all Wallabies games. So you can only imagine it'd be something similar with football. And I think, but from memory, it's to get a Stan subscription, including Stan Sport, is $19 a month, comparatively to the $60 to $70 a month you'd be paying for the Fox Sports subscription.
Yeah, if you can't get football into people's living rooms, we're not going to get more football fans. You know what I mean? It's hard enough to follow the football as it is. A lot of people didn't even know when the league was going to start this year because Fox just did no advertising. A-League memes, the Facebook page are the ones who are advertising it more than Fox. So yes, good on Stan. I hope they get it if they advertise it as they advertise the rugby.
Yeah, because I mean, they really have to we really need to use the broadcast deal in some ways to sort of grow the game as well as trying to monetize the game. Like both are important, but I feel like Fox, certainly recently, seeing as they've basically just been coasting towards the end of this deal, have really just been looking for ways to monetize and consolidate their own position. But like you said, Shannon, we really need that presence, at least on free-to-air TV, to bring the game to more people rather than just selling the game to people like us who are already going to subscribe to it. So I think that's really important. And Damo, to your point before, you sort of touched on our listener question this week, and why don't we go to that about how this, broadcast deal and uncertainty at the moment about all of these player contracts is going to wash out. I know we'll know more details once the details of this deal emerge and once it's done. But it seems like there could just be this massive exodus, or at least changing around of players again, mutual termination window, players hopping from club to club. Is that going to make for more exciting football, or are people a bit over this A-League transfer merry-go-round? And I'll read you boys out some of the comments that we got, and I've got them there in the run sheet, and they go along a few themes, and you can just sort of shout out your reactions and thoughts as we go through. So Jordan Renoff on Twitter is pumped for the shake-up. He wants to keep the merry-go-round going. He says, from what we hear, next season could be really interesting. Also seems to be a lot of faith going into the young players, which is certainly proving their worth thus far. And
I actually think that, I was going to say, I actually think that although there's, like I said before, 70% of players come off contract at the end of the season, we often see in the A-League anywhere between 20 to 40% of players come off contract at the end of any given season league-wide. It's particularly this. I think as soon as the broadcast deal is announced, clubs know what the salary cap's going to be. They'll start re-signing players. So
they'll
I don't
lock
think
people in. Yeah.
I don't necessarily think we will have a huge turnover in comparison to other years. The A-League does have big turnover in squads regularly anyway. That's just the nature of the league. But it may be a little bit more, but it won't be significant, I don't think.
But were we ever thinking that the A-League was going to be in a position where it didn't have an official broadcaster? Because wasn't there a lot of talk when the Fox deal was really breaking up, and a year ago, that the A-League were potentially going to look to develop their own broadcasting capabilities and sell the product like a Premier League, and that just looks to have been put in the too hard basket at the moment.
Yeah, well, I just think, and I think we spoke about it when this came up on the pod, that just the amount of money that costs to create your own OTT platform and produce your own content. I mean, just alone, the equipment and the staff you need to produce content is upwards of $10 to $15 million a year or something, what I've read. So, the APL can't afford to front that, not at this stage anyway. Maybe they can start doing that as a product for MPL and collect all that product together. But at this stage, it's just not a viable option, I don't think.
It looks like the most pragmatic solution is probably going to win out again. We've got a few comments in that regard as well, along the lines of people are happy with the chaos so long as we're getting paid. CityCat726 on Twitter says it's just the circumstances we find ourselves at the end of a broadcast cycle, and with COVID as well. And they say they do look forward to when the contracts are a little bit more long term and there's a proper transfer system in place, though. So people starting to touch on that need for a transfer system eventually. And I guess particularly seeing as we've seen such an influx of young talent, and, we want to make sure some of the clubs are getting compensated for developing these young players.
Yeah, and I think the transfer system's a big one because, and I know Shannon's a big fan of this, I've seen a lot of his tweets about it, MPL clubs in particularly need to benefit from producing players. MPL clubs are the ones missing out the most in not having an internal transfer system, because if they develop a player who gets an offer from an A-League club, then they just up and leave, and the MPL club loses their best player and get nothing for it. So they need to be getting transfer fees, whether it's $100,000, if $50,000. That's a huge amount of money to an MPL club in Australia.
Chris Edwards has a similar sort of view there, saying ideally we'd see more emerging talent from at home and abroad, with a greater focus on our academies and loans from top academies across the globe. And he says he's okay with Australia becoming a development or selling league, although that might not be a popular opinion. But I mean, that sounds like it would be a vast improvement on where we are now, and at least like that sort of money that's coming in that it's currently just, you know, not even getting put in back into the clubs at all, like, you know, is surely going to be going back into football and developing these players even better. So I mean, it can only be a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. And what's the point of some clubs bothering giving young players game time and trying to develop players if they're going to get nothing for it in return at the end? You know what I mean? It's hurting Australian football long term to not have a proper transfer system in place. I don't know how many countries in the world don't have a proper transfer system, but I'd say I'd be able to count them on you know, my hands.
And listener Arnab on Facebook says a bit of both, to be honest. There needs to be a proper transfer system where clubs can make money off transfers within the A-League. So it seems like that the view out there is that, yeah, we're okay with players getting on this merry-go-round in the A-League if that's what's going to happen here, you know, relative to other leagues in the world, so long as everyone's getting paid. And then the other views out there was like, well, this is just my club every season. Like Run Them Meme says, so this is just like Wanderers every season. Then, a few others like a Knicks fan and a Jets fan on Reddit both saying, yeah, well, that's like our club anyway. Half our players are 100 years old and will live out the rest of their football careers in Newcastle, and the rest are teenagers. So I guess they're just like resigned to their lot. Next item, boys, is the FFA Cup. This name change that we've speculated about for a little while. It looks like the FFA Cup are looking to officially change the name. There was a tweet on their social media, or a post on all of their social media, to calling for suggestions for the club for the cup going forward. And they included front runners such as the Australia Cup or the Les Murray Trophy in the tweet. But there was a few other names that got a bit of a mention as well. Johnny Warren also got a few mentions. Someone said the Bunnings FFA Cup, or the Australian Football Leagues Cup, or the AFL Cup for short. Don't know whether you boys have any great names up your sleeve.
Can I put a suggestion out there?
Yeah, go for it.
So I don't know if any of you lads remember Mike Cockrell, who's sadly departed us a few years ago. He was a big advocate for getting this cup format running in Australia. He was pushing it for years and years and years. People like Les Murray, a lot of respect for him. People are saying Les Murray Cup, this and that. There needs to be some sort of recognition for Mike Cockrell and what he actually did to get a competition like FFA Cup running, even if it's something like the medal for the best player, the finalists, Mike Cockrell medal or something. Yeah, I just think he deserves a bit of recognition because he's been left out of every conversation I've seen so far.
Yeah.
And the AFL Cup, I'd love that just for the joke factor of it.
Just for the band.
Yeah. I actually think that the APL trophy or the APL Cup is a good shout, because although it doesn't encompass, the APL is meant to be all the professional leagues, but the aim of that is to include as a tiered pyramid system the NPL clubs. I mean, they are called the National Premier Leagues. They want to be considered as professional as possible, and I think the long-term goal is for the APL to absorb the NPL. So that would fit for me. You know, the APL Cup with the Mike Cockrell Trophy, or because I think the grand final winner is already the Mark Viduka medalist for that tournament. But who knows? Who knows what they're going to do? They're probably going to pick something that we all hate. But it looks like the front runner.
We'll just continue to call it the fuck up anyway, so it doesn't matter. All right. And just before we move on, we've got to do some apologies. I've got an apology to make to listener HSN. Last week they wrote in about which Premier League clubs could sign Haaland, and I completely misread their comments about Leicester and Arsenal not being in the running because they had Vardy and Aubameyang. And so HSN got in our mentions and corrected the record, but it was more about how around the practicalities of those clubs not being able to afford him while already having their own decent options. But I wanted to correct the record because obviously we really appreciate listeners like HSN contributing so much to the pod. I know they pretty much write in with a question every other week, and that's the kind of stuff that makes this pod worth doing. So like we really, really appreciate that kind of engagement. So sorry about that. And I promise to read tweets before I hit record in the future, maybe.
Maybe.
If you want to send us in any questions or comments or hot takes, you can do that by email at mtagpodcast@gmail.com or on any of our social media. Links to all of those will be in the notes to this pod. Coming up next, the Bunnings A-League match week 13. All right, boys. The Wanderers have continued their winning form, dismantling the Glory 3-0 at Bankwest after putting 6 in the back of the net. Wanderers this season, Shanen, we'll start with you. Are they dark horses?
Well, I don't think many people were really underrating them, were they?
I was.
Maybe
definitely.
It's just a lot of Wanderers fans I know. But they were pretty optimistic about the fact that they're definitely going to be in the finals. But yeah, maybe that's just because I'm surrounded with Wanderers fans.
I didn't see too many people gassing them up, aside from the past 2 weeks where they've really been hitting their strides. But maybe I don't have enough Wanderers fans in my immediate radar. I don't know how many I want there, but they really stuck up on me.
Trust me, you don't want too many Wanderers fans in your circle. They can get very depressing when Wanderers aren't winning, which has been the past couple of years.
So Wanderers are second on 22 points now, but Adelaide and City have each got a couple of games in hand. Damo, what do you make of the Wanderers' chances this season? How are they looking to you?
I think they're playing great football. They look like it's all starting to come together after a bit of a rocky start. Mitch Duke's kind of glued the front line together there. But I also think it's kind of hard to judge that, like the A-League live ladder at the moment. There's a lot of and what will come of it at the end of the season. There's a lot of, teams that have played the same team a lot of times already. They haven't played other teams at all. Like you said before, there's teams that have got games in hand. I think if City win all their games in hand, they go top of the league. So, there's to look at the ladder and go, oh yeah, Western Sydney are up there. Well, if they'd all played 13 games, Western Sydney might be 4th or 5th. So it's kind of hard to judge on that alone. But on the way they've been playing and their performance against Perth particularly, they're playing great football. They'll definitely be in the finals.
So yeah, three in a row now to the Wanderers, and like you said, Damo, all really convincing performances. How much of this do we put down to Carl Robinson versus, say, some of their players who are stepping up, and not least of which is the returning Mitch Duke, who just looks in insane form?
Yeah, Duke's in great form, like I said, but I think one of the biggest factors to their success in the last few games has been Ziggy Gordon and McGowan at the back. They just look unbeatable, the two of them as a defensive partnership. And I think they even played 3 at the back against Perth. And those two, you could play 2 at the back with those two at the moment and you couldn't score against them.
Yeah, Ziggy Gordon honestly looks like one of the signings of the season.
He's like the second coming of
sentence I never thought I would say. Unbelievable. Now that he's not at the Mariners, I don't need to confuse him with Clisby when they're running around anymore. And I'm squinting going, who is that? But he has just been outstanding since he went to the Wanderers. Even when they weren't winning and they were having some patchy performances at the start of the season, he was right up there for them. Shanen, what do you make of what's behind some of these really improved performances from the Wanderers?
I think just the Wanderers players have a great respect for Carl Robinson. He seems like the type of bloke that the players just want to play out of their skin for. I see the way he talks to the players before and after the match. Win or lose, he's just in there getting behind them and all that stuff. And there's a reason why someone like Bernie Abini, for example, has followed him from Canada to Jets to Wanderers. He must just be a really good man manager, and the players just really want to play for him and perform for him. So I think the Wanderers, I think they're going to crack the top 6. And I think if they do, they might be one of those teams where even if they finish 5th or 6th, they'll just have that team spirit behind them that could even get them to like a semi or a grand final. I don't think they'll win the whole thing, but they're definitely building a good club culture there.
Yeah, that's what you love to see. And Perth, we should also give it just a quick mention. They're winless in 4 now, just sliding down the table. What's going wrong there?
It was only a couple of weeks ago that we were sitting here having this conversation about the conversation we just had about Wanderers, about Perth. Are they the smoky?
Yeah, but we blow with the wind, Damo. We've got to just change our colours every week.
Exactly, but Perth, I feel like they're really one-dimensional. In the first few weeks, they kind of got away with that because they were scoring a lot of goals, conceding a lot more, but they haven't changed anything. They keep conceding goals, and they've not solidified the back. And to be honest, I think Richie Garcia looks a little bit lost. He looks a little bit lost in what he needs to do next and how he needs to improve things. And I don't know if he was rushed into this job. It seems like he kind of was, but something's got to change there. And defensively, it's where it's got to start.
Yeah, I have to agree. I was watching the match, and how many chances Wanderers had, disallowed goals, all that sort of thing. Glory were let off the hook so many times, but Garcia just did not make any changes. He just kept letting Wanderers. They pretty much attacked the same way the whole match. They cut Perth Glory open the same way the whole match. And how many chances does it take before, Richie Garcia will go, shit, they're cutting through us. I might have to change something. He got let off the hook so many times, and he just kept letting it happen. It could have been like 7, 8, 9-0. But when you get that kind of luck, most people would think that you would learn from it and try and stop it from happening. He was just sitting back and letting it happen. So I think, Damo's right. Maybe he was a bit inexperienced, because an experienced manager would not let that happen.
I mean, this Perth side is just so top heavy as well, isn't it? Like, look at the front part of their field. They've got Keogh, Castro, Fornaroli, D'Agostino, Kilkenny in the midfield. And then their back 4 could be starting in an NPL side, to be honest.
The thing too, everyone who watches the A-League or has half a brain knows that the Wanderers forward line is very, very quick. Richie Garcia playing Latchman, who's very slow, Bodnar, who's very slow against them. And
in a high line.
Just wondering why they're cutting through them with through balls. Like, Latchman's a pretty decent defender from what I've seen, but of course he's not going to be able to chase down Mitch Duke, with a through ball cutting through. He's not going to be able to chase down someone like Yeboah and all those quick players Wanderers have. So it was just set up wrong from the start. I'm not trying to just sit here and, take the piss out of Garcia, but these are just mistakes that you wouldn't think that, if there was an experienced manager like Popper, for example, he wouldn't set up his team that way from the start, and he wouldn't keep making those mistakes. But that's just what's been happening to the Glory for the past couple of weeks now, and they're not learning.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. 3 wake-up calls, like you said, Shanen. I mean, unless they're trying to play a high line and getting these offsides is what they were really going for. But I mean, they were all very tight offsides too. So I mean, you either get better at doing plan A, if that was your plan A, playing a high line, or you change something, like you said. But we said this about Perth at the start of the season in our season preview, that their defense was absolutely decimated in the off season. They lost like 3 or 4 first team defenders basically, or they lost all of their back line essentially, and they had to replace it from scratch. And I don't think they replaced with better than what they had. They've gone down a level, and they've conceded the second most goals in the league behind Melbourne Victory, who are rusted onto the bottom of the table at the moment. So I think that tells you all you need to know about Perth. But we should move on to the game that finished right before we started recording tonight. Newey in Adelaide. This finished 4-1 to Adelaide. It was 4-1, wasn't it? Yep. Adelaide flying at the moment, 5 in a row for them. And I think 10 minutes into the game, Ben Homer, who was on comms, our boy, said, there was it's a side full of confidence in the Reds against a side devoid of confidence in Newcastle. And I just thought that summed up this game very well. Newcastle trying to arrest that run of 3 on the bounce, and then now they've lost 4 on the bounce. Meanwhile, Adelaide are just going from strength to strength. But we spoke about Perth's dodgy defending. How much of this is Newey's dodgy defending, Shannon?
Well, I was already harsh on him at the start, but yeah, it's just Nigel Bogard really looked like he was very out of his depth tonight. But it wasn't just him, to be fair. It was Katrumbis, it was O'Toole. Topper Stanley had a good game, but yeah, it looked like the 4 defenders had just met each other, before kickoff. They had no communication. Italiano had no communication with them, and it was sad. That's all I'll say. It was sad.
Yeah, absolute shit show. And Adelaide, though, we and again, this mirrors the match we were talking about before. We were saying Western Sydney Wanderers, dark horses, HSN, Zenith Clark, who I assume is HSN, in the comments says, are Adelaide the real Smokies?
I mean, it's kind of looking that way, the way they're playing. I think they've scored, if you count their 4 goals from tonight, 15 or 16 goals in their last 5 games. So talking about a defense devoid of confidence, Adelaide are just firing on all cylinders at the moment. And it just seems like they've got options everywhere. They're bringing 2-3 people off the bench every week that can change a game, and they're rotating who's starting because they had a good week. And I mean, Colby has got a lot of weapons at his disposal, and he's using them all really, really well.
Speaking of goals too, a player who's probably gone under the radar for how good he's been playing because he's hated so much is Stephen Moore. I think he's scored in his past 3 or 4 matches. And boy, I tell you what, people really dislike him, but he has had a really good season so far this year. Shithousery aside, all the diving aside, he's been really good in the midfield for the most part, not against Perth Glory and Kilkenny. But yeah, is he a dark horse for the Socceroos squad? And if so, would he be the most unpopular Socceroos member ever if he gets called up?
Well, the second part of that question is probably easier to answer than the first.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we were kind of talking about this, I think it was last week or maybe even the week before, that Mork's always been a good box-to-box player, but this year he's added goals, which has really changed his game and changed Adelaide's game. And yeah, look, if you're picking a Socceroos squad right now on form, he's probably within a shout of the squad. I mean, Dimi Petratos is doing similar things over in the Golf League. He's scored a lot of goals and a lot of assists, so he'd be another very similar type player in that position. So who knows? There could be a lot of Smokies in the next Socceroos squad. It's going to be interesting to see what Graham Arnold thinks.
Looking forward to seeing the Roos play again at some point. It's been like a full year since we've seen them. So just as an aside, but Damo, you were saying about all of the options Carl Viet has. That was one of the points that I had down to mention as well. Like Mork, Goodwin, Yengi and Halloran all just playing in form. But I mean, does anyone remember Al Hassan and Motore? Like Motore, who we were gassing up like 5 or 6 weeks ago, they weren't even in my mind tonight. I wasn't even thinking about them. These other guys have been performing so well. And then you got Pacific Nyongabire as well. And as soon as one player dips out of form or gets injured or even gets rotated, like you said, Damo, the next one comes in and just like fills that place and then some. So yeah, Adelaide are looking very ominous in terms of their form.
Yeah, and just as a side note to that kind of depth, in talent, a good friend of mine plays in the South Australian Premier League, the NPL in South Australia, and his younger brother actually plays in the Adelaide United youth side, and he said to me that Adelaide United are probably the favourites to win the South Australian NPL this year. They've got that many good, like 16, 17, 18-year-olds in the squad that they could be within a chance of winning the whole thing. So it just seems, and we talk about it all the time, it's like a conveyor belt of talent coming out of South Australia there, and the South Australian Institute of Sport is just creating footballers that just are, setting the league on fire.
Yeah, another reason for the transfer system. Like these kids are just like, it's just a factory out there. So, but yeah, Adelaide up to third now. They could have gone into second if they'd banged in a few more goals, but they were feeling slack in the second half, so they didn't do that. But we'll continue to keep an eye on them. Wellington and Brisbane played out a 1-1 draw in the earlier game today on Sunday, and if there was ever a game of two halves, I think this was probably it. It was all Knicks in the first half, which was paid off with that Hamed goal, and then Brisbane came out firing in the second half. Yes, goal Maratu grabbed a goal for Brisbane after we've just been rubbishing him all over the internet since he rejoined. Joined Brisbane and rejoined the A-League. It was like quite a tasty little header too. And Gillespie got sent off late in the match for a second yellow for a last-minute challenge on Sotirio, but Brisbane ended up holding on for the result. Shanen, I'll go to you first as the non-Brisbane Roar fan member of the pod tonight. What did you make of the result, first of all?
I think it was good from Brisbane to get a result out of this because, as you said, they were completely outplayed in the first half. And I think that's just good management and good leadership from Brisbane Roar to be able to go, we're only one goal behind. We absolutely got outplayed in the first half, and they come back and they got a result. Probably, Wellington Phoenix probably took their foot off the pedal a little bit and were a completely different side, but that takes nothing away from Brisbane Roar, who showed some good team spirit for the first time in a few weeks.
And Damo, what did you make of the result? A fair result? A 1-1 draw?
Yeah, look, I think if you look on the balance of the game, 1-1 you could say is a fair result. But I agree with Shanen that Brisbane probably feel the luckier to come away with any points from that game, considering that they well could have been 2 or 3 down and then that handball right at the end, or non-handball, however you look at it. I don't know, and Adam Peacock said it the best, that those rules are as clear as mud. So, if I was a Knicks fan, I'd feel robbed that wasn't a penalty and that wasn't the 3 points sealed. But yeah, look, Warren Moon, he admitted last week that they've got things that they need to change and improve on, and that's 6 games on the bounce now without a win for Brisbane. And I don't know about you, Colby, but as a Raw fan, I feel Warren Moon kind of rotates a squad not based on form, but to keep people happy. He wants to give everyone a turn, and it's kind of this youth football kind of vibe. It really needs to be, and he's shown in the past he can make good decisions to bring players on to change games, and he did it tonight. He brought players on to change the game, and they got a result. But he doesn't then stick with those players that change the game and say, okay, well, you performed well. Let me start you next week and see what you can do. He kind of just rotates people for the sake of rotating people. That's how I see it. So I don't know. It's there is questions that need to be asked of Brisbane, but before this 6-game run, we were talking about Brisbane of playing the best football in the league. And some games, they were unstoppable. Ever since Scott McDonald is out of the squad, they've been playing poorly.
That's what I was about to say, to be honest. And another sentence that I never thought I would say, but he seems to be pretty key to their ability to score goals. Like, Brisbane never seem to look out of these games, particularly in this winless run. I think it's 6 or it might even be 7 games without a win now. They never really look out of games, but equally they don't look like they're creating that many big chances to score. So. And I think I agree that there's a strong correlation between Scotty Mack not being in the team and nice little goal by Mabratu tonight, and Masato Kudo is not quite up to speed yet, clearly, but yeah, they need someone who's just going to be that good foil for Joick and Dylan Wenzel Halls as well. So it'd be good to have him back and get Brisbane some sort of sense of togetherness up front. You mentioned that the handball, Damo, and you'd be spewing if you were the Knicks. But what about what about their other sort of things that have gone against them in the past couple of games? That are they pretty unlucky? Because Ufuk Talay after the game looked like he was feeling the pressure.
Yeah, look, I don't know who it was, and I can't remember exactly the tweet, but to paraphrase it, I read a tweet that said, Ufuk Talay looks like he's about to challenge any Raw player to a fight in the car park with his shirt off, which is a pretty good analysis of how he was probably feeling and how he's been feeling over the last month or so. And we were talking to Jesse about it earlier in the group chat, and Jesse's obviously a Knicks fan, and we just said it feels like every game the Knicks are robbed of a decision at the moment. And I do feel they're a little bit unlucky, and I do feel like sometimes being the home side, there's an unconscious bias that decisions like this go for you. And the fact that they're not playing games at home probably contributes to that.
Yeah, and the Knicks are still in 10th, but I mean, yeah, they look so much better than 10th in the way they've been going about these games. Like, I don't think I would have been too upset if they'd got the result tonight. I don't think I would have felt too hard done by, I guess, as a Raw fan if they'd got the result. The game against the Wanderers that they went down 4-3 in. I mean, there was a critical goal that they had chalked off for offside. They deserved at least a point out of that, you would have thought. And I wouldn't have even been surprised if they'd won that game. I wouldn't have felt like the Wanderers were that hard done by. So, the results should start coming for them soon. But it's like, I don't know, what are we now, almost a bit over a third of the way through the season. So the results are going to have to start coming soon if they want to try and make finals. The results did come for the Mac Bulls, though. Came from behind to see off the Woo and make it 2 from 2 at home on that wet Saturday in Sydney. Two of the Mac Bulls imports, their big imports, Derbyshire and Susaeta, delivered. What did you make of them, Shanen?
I'm just curious whether or not Damon will admit that maybe Derbyshire is a decent player yet, because it seems like almost every week he's either on the score sheet or getting an assist. It's clear that he's quality.
No, he's overrated. Not a fan. We have our boys and we have our non-boys.
He's a non-boy. I don't know what we're calling that, but that's yep.
It's a thing.
You've just never been on him. You're off him.
Man, doesn't matter how good he is, I'm off him. He's bad.
I guess the most important question I see, to be asked in relation to this game and the Mac Bulls is it Susaeta or Shushaeta?
We might have to get. I was going to say Jesse, but Jesse doesn't speak Spanish. That's chalk that off.
Because Ben Homer on comp was calling him.
Ask her how it's pronounced.
We need somebody to set the record straight, because I was twitching when I heard Ben Homer saying Shushaeta. I don't know. I don't know what's right, and I don't know what's up or down anymore. So,
well, maybe we should add Speedy. He seems to be a pronunciation expert.
We should. Just on the Woo though, two goals from crosses. I think Rudan was talking about how they were looking out for this, like even going into the game, but they were still conceding goals there. Do you reckon like they're straight back to the park, just like banging in corners and trying to defend them all week?
I actually think this aerial issue they've got defensively is not due to the fact that they haven't got defensive players that can head the ball. Like, look at the back three they played with this weekend was Imai, Barry Calver, and Uzcock. You've got about a combined 50 feet of height in there. So it's not a height thing. I think it's the fact that they play with the three at the back, and Dylan Pereus is essentially a striker playing as a fullback. Connor Payne is a winger striker playing as a fullback. They're staying way too far forward. There's just way too many crosses coming into the box. If you're looking at percentages, of course, some of those are going to go in, like more of those are going to go in when more balls are coming into the box from those good areas.
That's exactly what I was going to touch on. It's not so much that I think they're bad at defending in the air. It's just the fact that they let so many balls come in. I mean, it's just obvious that if they get like 50, 60 million crosses, what it seems every match come in, they're going to get a few goals conceded from it. So I think Rudin, as stubborn as he is, maybe needs to take a look at how he sets up his team, because that's a real weakness, and I think teams are starting to catch on to that, and they're taking advantage of it.
I think the biggest problem with that, Shannon, is that they don't seem to have a natural left fullback, and they don't seem to have a natural right fullback apart from Risdon, who has got a long-term injury. So playing a flat back four or even a back four that's a little bit more mobile doesn't really seem like it'd work, because then you're essentially having fullbacks that do nothing. So the back three is kind of his only option at the moment, it seems, with the squad that he's got.
It's like when Ange wanted to play Lecky as a wing back in the Socceroos, and like everything was just coming down that side because he was just not a natural defender.
Of course. You can turn some players into defenders, but some players, they just won't want to come back.
Yeah, and Boreas is doing so well scoring goals as well, and that's obviously Connor Payne's strength as well, getting in behind and doing stuff like that. And then you rely on them having the engine or not to get back and defend, or them even being defenders and timing those runs and being in the right positions, and there's a bit more to it than that as well. So yeah, I think you've definitely just touched on their main issue, with the defense at the moment. I don't know if you had any other observations from this game, boys, but I had one, and it was just like Lachie Wales. I've been trying to tell Tommy C this about his boy for a long time, but the man's a spud. Like I think he's going to be playing NPL next season. He didn't cut it at City. He's not cutting it at the Woo. I think he's played. I've written down here he's played 75 A-League games and scored 3 goals. That's like over nearly 4,000 minutes of football for 3-goal return as a sort of winger who often gets played as an inside winger or even a striker on occasions. Not good enough.
Yeah, Lachie Wales has got Hume City written all over him.
I reckon he'd bang in goals in the NPL, but he's just like
probably not.
Just doesn't seem good enough for the A-League.
Yeah, I think you're underrating the NPL a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think he would bang goals in the NPL.
All right, fine. Well, anyway, we'll see next season when he's there. So, that will remain to be seen. Maybe he'll go get a bunch of confidence and come back up.
Well, now that you said that, he's probably going to score 8 goals in the next couple of games.
Well, I know I've given players the big ups like that before. So, and I think that's what Damo's done to Derbyshire. So now maybe that I've put the hard word on Lachie Wales, he'll just become really good. The Big Blue was the final game of the round, and Melbourne Victory have managed to stop their losing streak by having the game postponed. Meanwhile, Redders is back in form with a clean sheet, didn't concede any goals because the game is postponed. So we'll see this one. I don't know. Has it been rescheduled? I think it was like...
Sure yet.
Yeah. Anyway.
I did have one thing to mention about this game. There's been a lot of photos and pictures of the amount of Melbourne Victory supporters that travelled to Sydney for the game, because obviously it was a double-header, W League and A League, all at Cogra. And... obviously, when the game was called off, they all just stayed in the pub and kept drinking. And I'm not sure if it was the whole team or a big bunch of the team, and the managers turned up to the pub and just put a tab down for the fans and said, here you go, have some drinks on us because we're not playing and you kind of deserve a little bit of happiness. So, Melbourne Victory have had a lot of problems recently, but that's a really good move from the club to do that, to re-engage some of their most hardcore fans that have travelled to Sydney for a game like that. So credit to them.
Yeah, I agree. I had that down as one of my moments of the week as well. I think that's really good areas from the Victory, considering how much their fans have been hurting lately. So to do that even as a gesture, I think that's great from the playing group. Obviously, the fans will still be pretty pissed off at the club and the board and all the rest of that. But for the players to do that, that's very well done. But what does this postponed Big Blue mean for our A-League Survivor tipping comp? Well, for HSN and Matt Olsen, who both tipped Sydney, they're going to default to the next week. So 2 sweetest words in the English language for you there, boys. Or you'll both have to tip again next week to see who's going to be the next champion, because Sal, I think you're out. You tipped wrong this week. I didn't write down who you tipped, but I remember seeing it and it was wrong. So well played to Sal. 3rd place. Still to come, match day 29 of the Premier League. So match day 29 of the Premier League. Short match week this week. Only 8 teams playing, 4 games. And there were just 2 games played over the weekend, and it's all about the relegation spots this weekend, with Fulham and Leeds playing first. Fulham had a chance to lift themselves out of the relegation zone with a win over Leeds, but Leeds went up another gear in the second half and grabbed the 2-1 win thanks to a Bamford goal and a counter-attack finished off by Rafinha. Bamford grabbed that goal and an assist as well. He's now up to 14 goals and 6 assists in the league after his omission from the England squad this week, and after he was being trashed by all and sundry going into the season, saying he wasn't good enough to be a Premier League striker. And he's seen off their record signing in Rodrigo and, just asserted himself in the team. Has he done enough to prove the doubters wrong?
Look, I think he's had a great... You go, Shannon.
Well, the doubters were saying he wouldn't even get 1 Premier League goal, so yeah, he's done more than enough. But even me, like I always thought Bamford was an okay player, like not the best, but I'm just absolutely shocked. This is not the player who I was watching in the Premier League and the Championship for the past few seasons. I don't know what he's done this season, but yeah, like you could fool me if don't know.
I think Bamford is he ticks every box of someone who's a benefactor of the way Bielsa wants to play football. And I think that's really benefited his career. And look, I don't want to say that he's having an above average season, because this could be his level. But I feel like if Bamford was to move on to another Premier League club, he wouldn't be anywhere near as successful as at Leeds. And it's a lot down to the way Leeds play football and how involved Bamford can be, how many touches he gets of the ball as a 9. He doesn't have to play back to goal. He's allowed a little bit more freedom than a lot of number 9s are. And I think he'd be feeling really stiff to miss out on that England squad when you've got Ollie Watkins and Bukayo Saka making the squad as in the forward line over him. So I can see why he'd be a little bit upset, but I mean, it's tough to get a gig as the England number 9 when that's, the most sought after position in the squad. And you've got Harry Kane, Calvert-Lewin and Rashford who are all vying for that as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you're saying, Damo, about Bielsa's style and how Bamford benefits from that. I mean, the amount of players that are like hitting the byline and then just cutting the ball back, and the way Leeds play, he doesn't have to hold it up that much. He's able to just run right essentially a lot of the time, especially against teams like Fulham that aren't defending as well as some of the other teams in the division. But yeah, Fulham in this game just looked like Leeds just sucked them into a basketball match and looked comfortable in the end. 9 games to go for the season for all of the teams, but we're looking at Fulham. They've got games against Wolves, Villa and Newcastle at home on that final day, which looks like it could potentially be a relegation 6-pointer on the final day. Do you give Fulham any chance of staying up with that run?
Yeah, look, I still think Fulham can stay up. I think the way they've been playing in this second half of the season has been quite impressive. The turnaround from the first half of the season, they've been chasing down Newcastle and Brighton for the better part of 2 or 3 months now, and they've caught up. Although the Newcastle and Brighton have got a game in hand, they're within touching distance of both clubs with a couple of months left to play. So I think if you'd asked Fulham fans on Christmas Day if they thought they'd be in this position to stay up, they would have told you no. So I think the momentum itself, or momentum alone, can keep them up, because Newcastle are feeling like they can't get a result anywhere, yet Fulham have beaten some of the biggest clubs in the country.
Yeah, and it's momentum that works both ways, isn't it? Like, and we'll come on to Newcastle in a moment, but yeah, like when you're losing, it can be a vicious cycle. And even though Fulham are still losing, they've gotten a few they've gotten a few results, a few draws here and there, and they're in games. So. Yeah, I agree, Damo. I think at Christmas I would have agreed and said no chance. I think even like just after Christmas we were saying, yep, relegation, it's set, done, forget about it. But anything can happen in these seasons, and there are a lot of twists and turns. The only other thing I wanted to mention from this game is the Luke Ayling goal that was ruled out for offside early in the game, and he's run to the sideline and pulled off these hairband.
He took his hair
done,
out and everything,
and did a little air guitar like rock star celebration. And I saw a tweet about that, and it said hairband £5, air guitar free. Having a goal ruled out for offside after the choreographed performance, priceless.
Yeah, that's good. I saw the goal go in, and I got up and I went to the toilet, and then I came back and I was like, wait a minute, did I miss a goal? I was so confused because I was like, I swear they scored. Yeah, and then I learned that it was ruled out. So that's VAR for you.
Yeah. So Fulham remain in 18th on 26 points, but they're within touching distance of Newcastle and Brighton, who played as well this weekend. Brighton getting some relief though, with their own relegation battle with that huge 3-0 result over Newcastle with goals to Trossard, Mopé, and that guy Welbs. This is all about the relegation chat here. So we've talked about Fulham. But do we think, how big of a chance do you give Newcastle of going down, Shanen?
100%. And I say this as a Newcastle fan. 100%. I do not see in my wildest fantasies Newcastle staying up. I'm a very optimistic guy, but when it comes to Newcastle United, especially this past couple of seasons, it's just been downhill slowly and slowly and slowly. And, a lot of Newcastle fans, we're kind of hoping for relegation because that way we can get some positivity in the club. We can get, usually when we get in the Championship, we do really well, and then we get back up to the Premier League and we have like 1 or 2 good seasons. So, yeah, I think the writing's on the wall, especially after that last result.
Yeah, look, and I think you only need to look at their run into the end of the season. Newcastle have got to play Spurs, West Ham, Liverpool, Arsenal, Leicester, City, and Fulham on the final day. So I think Fulham have the far easier run in, and goal difference is going to be huge when it comes to a situation like this. And I think Newcastle's goal difference is 6 goals worse than Fulham's at this stage. They've actually lost more games than Fulham. Fulham have just drawn a lot of games. So, I actually, like you're talking about, Colby, momentum works both ways. And I said Fulham have got that momentum. They know they can beat anyone. I don't think Newcastle believe they can beat anyone at this stage.
Yeah,
it's actually, and sorry to interrupt, but it's actually probably a good thing the fans aren't in the stadium, because you've seen St. James Park when situations like this, they really get on the back. They're passionate fans. It's a big club, and they really get on the back of the players. And if anything, the players are actually probably going to benefit from there being no fans in the ground at the moment.
Well, and the fans have been making their displeasure known wherever they can, and at the moment, the only place they can do that is social media. And I've seen a lot of calls for Steve Bruce to go. That's getting louder and louder. What are your thoughts there, Shanen?
Well, I'll just say, it's pretty dire circumstances at the club when, a lot of fans are hoping that a war criminal takes over the club instead of Mike Ashley. That's how bad it is. You know what I mean? Like, there's honest to God people, like fans, who are willing to, just look the other way when it comes to murders arranged and stuff, just so that we can get Mike Ashley and all that sort of thing out of the club. So, yeah, it's a very negative, fan base, especially this season. I don't think I've seen one bit of positivity for the past few weeks in the Newcastle fan base and social media. I've left a lot of the Newcastle groups that it's just been that dire and depressing.
And we've talked about whether we think Fulham are going to stay up. We've talked about Newcastle. Brighton obviously gave themselves a little bit of breathing room, but we don't necessarily think that they're safe. But who do you want to see go down, and who would you rather see stay up there?
Well, I think Shannon's already spoken that he kind of wants to see Newcastle go down. It's difficult because you don't want to see a club like Newcastle in the Championship. They're a big club. They have a lot of stead in English football, and you want to see them in the Premier League. But at the same time, I mirror exactly Shannon's opinion on, sometimes you need to go down to get a kick up the arse to come back up and do things differently. And the last time they did that, they came back up and they had that season under Pardew where they finished 5th or 6th. And it was like Newcastle are flying. And then the shit hit the fan again and Ashley couldn't sell the club. And the same things just happened, like rinse and repeat. So, yeah, I don't want to see Newcastle go down, but I also do. And I kind of want to see Fulham stay in the Premier League because I want to see the new Craven Cottage full in the Premier League because that's a beautiful old ground and they've renovated it, and I want to see it full and rocking in the Premier League.
I sort of agree with that sentiment, actually, on both sides, on the Newcastle side and the Fulham side. And I feel like Scott Parker is one of those really underappreciated managers who's just grinded and grinded. He did well with them in the Championship, got them up. And now, I'd like to see him have another transfer window, a proper transfer window in the Premier League to see if he could improve the team, because every player who's come into that team, that Fulham team throughout the season this year has improved the side.
Particularly Josh Mudger, who came in, who unfortunately Sheffield United were linked with him and they decided to sign Rhian Brewster instead for 15 million extra pounds and 12 less goals. So, hey.
The difference for me with a club like Fulham to a club like Newcastle is you can see a club like Fulham, they're building something, or at least trying to build something. They're bringing in some good new players. You can tell that they're trying to get this style of football worked out. It doesn't quite work out every week, but you can tell that they're building at something. Whereas a club like Newcastle, they're just been stagnant. They're not really building things. The players they bring in are just, whoever's cheap and stuff. They don't really have a style of football that they play. Happy to sit back and let teams attack, all that sort of thing. So a team like Fulham, given another year in the Premier League, with what they've been trying to build, which hasn't really worked out this year, to be honest, next season they could be one of those teams who, around the top 10 mark, maybe not crack the top 10, but one of those teams that finishes like 11 and 12, gets some good performances and goes under the radar, because they're certainly building a decent squad. They've got some good young players, and you can see what Scott Parker's trying to do.
Yeah, it's a little bit like Brighton, right? Like when Brighton came up, they did well in the Championship, came up, and then just really hung in there, like for the season and a half after they come up. And now they've really looked to, they might be still in a bit of trouble this season, but, they've had long patches where they were playing good football and they're looking, they've looked a lot more stable.
Yeah, and I think, on the flip side of that conversation about Fulham, who could build and be a lot better, it also feels like if Newcastle avoid relegation this year, they're probably going to get relegated next year. That's what it feels like at this stage, because, like you said, there's nothing really building. There's no identity to the club, no matter who the manager that comes in. At the moment, there's nothing there.
That's the thing. That's why the fans are so, I can't think of the word, so negative around the club, is because if Newcastle survive relegation like what we did last season, I think the season before, haven't played good football, but Mike Ashley, Steve Bruce, they go, okay, we survived relegation, that's good enough. Maybe get one or two cheap players, keep sticking with the same style of football, and just what is it building to? It's like prolonging death. You know what I mean? Just put us out of our misery.
Yeah.
On that note, the rest of the weekend's Premier League is happening overnight tonight. We've got West Ham hosting Arsenal. That's 5th against 10th. which is just weird to say.
Usually it would be like
usually the other way
West
around.
Ham 10th.
We'll let this one play out and Tommy come back next week and give us a bit of coverage. And then we've got Villa hosting Tottenham to round out the match day. We'll just take a quick break, but coming up next, we'll talk about the Champions League round of 16 and the quarterfinal draw. All right, boys. Chelsea and Atleti was one of the games I think I want to just touch on before we hit on the quarterfinal draw. It's the first time since 2014 that Chelsea have made it through to the last 8 of the Champions League. This game in particular, I mean, this whole tie in particular, I suppose, against Atleti, we sort of were expecting it to be a lot tougher for Chelsea, but it really didn't seem like they made that much of a hard work against Atleti at all.
Yeah, and I think we kind of spoke about this last week on how Chelsea are kind of playing their football under Tuchel at the moment. They've built from the back and they're working out what's going on at the top end of the field, which is exactly the same mentality that Atleti have had over the last probably 5 or 6 years. Is that, if they're solid at the back and they don't concede goals and everything else kind of figures itself out. So this tie for me was really interesting because that was 2 managers that were going pretty much the same kind of philosophy, and it turned into this just counter-attacking midfield battle, which ironically Chelsea got the better of because Kante was probably the defining factor over the both legs. He's hit his form again, and when you've got Kante in midfield at the peak of his powers, there's very little opposition that can break that down.
Yeah, and on the other side of that, Atleti for someone like Luis Suarez, who they had, who they brought in and improved the side, and really has had a good season in La Liga, just comes over to when they're sort of in European competition in the Champions League, they've just looked absolutely toothless. And maybe he wasn't built, he wasn't really built for the style of football that Atleti were trying to play against Chelsea in this tie. I mean, he's obviously having success in La Liga, but
I read an interesting stat about Suarez, I think it was today, that in his last 25 away games in the Champions League, he's failed to score. And the funny stat there it's something like that's 36 hours of football or something ridiculous. And you could watch the whole first 2 seasons of Lost in the same time it's been since Suarez scored an away goal in the Champions League.
that's like Lockie Wales goal to minute ratio.
0.
So are you saying Lockie Wales is the Australian version of Suarez?
Oh, yeah. Tommy C would love that comparison.
Yeah, Tommy's going to quote me on that. Thanks, Shannon. But I mean, I guess it just makes me wonder why some teams or some players are so good in their domestic comps, because Atleti look like they're probably going to win La Liga. Yet that they've looked pretty average in Europe this season. I just don't understand how some teams could be like that.
I also think it's sometimes down to priorities. At the moment, Atleti are the top of La Liga, and they've kind of not been in the best form. They're getting chased down a little bit at the moment. So their mind is probably on solidifying the league title. Whereas Chelsea, they haven't had a great league form. They might not qualify for the Champions League if they don't win the Champions League. So it's hard to kind of compare European football to league form, because one team could really care about one and kind of have the other one in the back of their mind.
So what should Chelsea be prioritizing then?
Well, I think for them, it's got to be top 4. It has to be top 4. It has to be qualifying for Europe next year. But, it's really tough because Tuchel wants to come in and win a trophy, but the Champions League, the hardest one to win. It's the only one he's really got a chance of winning this year. So does he kind of preference finishing 4th in the league, or does he preference trying to win a trophy, which is the hardest trophy in the world to win? It's such a tough decision to make. But knowing him, he'll play the same football every game. That's kind of his mantra.
And Real Madrid and Atleti were the other game that we want to touch on, just in terms of the last of the round of 16. Looked pretty comfortable in the end for Real Madrid. They won the second leg 3-1, going up, I think, 4-1 on aggregate. But I just wanted to touch on Benzema, who has just been in unreal form for Madrid in this game and in La Liga as well. I've got a quote here. One of the journos asked Zidane after the game, who's going to be the next number 9 at Real Madrid? They said Haaland, or is Ronaldo going to come back? And he just said Benzema. Is he one of the most underrated strikers out there?
Certainly. I think having Cristiano Ronaldo at Real Madrid was probably good for him because they come in like similar times. I think Benzema was a year later. Obviously, the pressure's not on you as much as if you've got a player like Ronaldo taking all the credit. But the thing is, he kind of got, overshadowed, as any player on earth would, playing next to Ronaldo. As soon as Ronaldo left, it was Benzema, stepping up and showing people, how good of a player he is. And if you look at his numbers, he's consistently been doing it for Real Madrid. I think he's been there 10 years. He's been so consistent scoring the goals for 10 years for Real Madrid, and it doesn't look like he's slowing down. The thing is, people are just taking more notice of him because it's just him in the squad who's really standing out. There's no Ronaldo or anyone like that. Hazard hasn't stepped up. So, yeah, he's definitely underrated.
Yeah, and Hazard, as you say, that's I keep seeing that stat that he's got more injuries than goals since he got to Real Madrid, and that's just indicative of where his career's at. I just don't know what's happened. The wheels have just absolutely fallen off. He was looking like one of the best midfielders in the world, and then rocks up, and it's just falling apart.
And ironically, one of the biggest parts of Hazard's game in England was his durability. He played every game, week in, week out, 2 games a week for the better part of 6 or 7 years at Chelsea. He was playing, 50 to 60 games a year, and then all again, and he's falling apart. So it's a really strange situation.
The real question now is Eden Hazard Belgium's version of Lockie Wales now?
I reckon Hazard would rip up the MPLA. I don't think I'm underrating it. I reckon he would go all right.
Oh, he might bang in a few for Hume City.
Eden Hazard and Lockie Wales on each wing. What a team.
Oh, can you imagine?
They'd never play. They'd never score.
Oh, shit. But Bayern and City, meanwhile, did it pretty easy. BAU for each of them. Bayern ended up winning their tie against Lazio 6-2 on aggregate, and City got up 4-0 on aggregate. I guess let's talk about the quarterfinal draw, because that's where it's all at. Some very tasty looking matchups coming up. No Messi or Ronaldo for the first time since 2005, and no Italian team for the first time since 2016. But we have got City against Dortmund, so Haaland's trial match, the best defense in the competition against the top scorer. We've got Porto taking on Chelsea. We've got Bayern and PSG, so that's the 2020 final replay. After getting knocked out in the round of 16 3 years running, PSG have now qualified for back-to-back quarterfinals. They've already knocked out Barca, so this is just looking pretty tasty. And then to round it out, we've got Real Madrid and Liverpool in the 2018 final replay. Boys, what matchups are you really looking forward to there?
I've got 2 that I've kind of penciled in as I won't miss, and that's particularly the first leg is the Dortmund City game. I just think that when you've got a striker in the form that Erling Haaland's in, anything can happen. No matter how poor your league form is, on any given day, he could just do wonders. So I just want to see what Dortmund can do, because obviously City are going to go in being heavy favourites in that game. But it'd be really interesting to watch. And then the other game is Liverpool versus Real Madrid, because they're 2 teams that are kind of at they're they're not doing well in the league. Things aren't really going their way. There's a lot of questions from fans and a lot of questions from pundits thinking, are they up to it? So it'll be really interesting to see how they both perform, whether one will stand up or whether it'll be a boring tie or whether it'll be ridiculously exciting. So I think they're the two most interesting matchups for me.
What about you, Shannon?
I'm really interested in the PSG versus Bayern match, not just because it's two phenomenal teams, but I'm very interested to see what would happen if PSG don't make it past Bayern, because, there's been a lot of talk about, the French league being a farmers league and all this sort of stuff, people slagging off the French league. But PSG have been performing very well in Europe. They haven't won it yet, and I think if they don't win it, is that the time when a player like Mbappe goes to Real Madrid or leaves PSG? Is this the last chance they kind of have to show people that they're worthy of having a player like Kylian on their roster? I'm just very curious to see what happens if they don't win. Hopefully we won't be talking about that, because I'm kind of sick of Bayern Munich fans and their, egos. But yeah, I'm curious to see what happens if they lose.
Must be so easy being a Bayern fan. Fuck.
Your life is just non-stop trophies.
You just win everything every year. It's bullshit.
Trophies and watching Lewandowski score goals, yeah. I mean, the thing about Bayern and PSG, there was a good point that was made on the ESPN FC podcast either today or yesterday when they were talking about the draw. And one of the pundits on there made the point that every year PSG have pretty much wrapped up Ligue 1 by this point in the season, but this year it's by no means certain that they're going to win it. I think Lille are on top of it, and PSG have a big game against Lille like right before this. But the point they were making about this is that PSG in previous years, they've said have just sort of switched off because they've been coasting in Ligue 1, and now they're having to be really switched on in their domestic league, and that might play into their performances as well because the players are all just going to be up for it constantly. So that might be a factor, and I think that would be interesting to watch the performance of PSG, regardless of what the results are.
Colby, talking about ESPN FC, I'm not sure if it was ESPN. I think it might have been a journal from Sports Illustrated. So still in that like US circle of football reporting, and I'm sure Sal might have heard. I remember his name, but he said something to the effect of the Champions League most years and European football, these knockout competitions most years, the two best teams by the eye test end up meeting each other in the quarterfinal or the semifinal, and it's kind of a, that's kind of the biggest game of the year, and the final takes away from the final. And suggested that there should be some sort of seeded system to their playoffs or to the knockout stages, much like there is with American playoffs. That the two best teams, and with tennis, you could say that the two best teams only meet each other in the final or in the semi-final. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm not too sure about that. It sounds good in theory, but yeah, I mean, I suppose the draw is already pretty doctored, right? And it's just doctored in ways that we don't know about, or there's no transparency to the method by which these matchups are put together. And I guess so. In that sense, I might be okay with it. But yeah, it seems like a pretty manufactured way to get like, Bayern and Real Madrid final every year or something like that. Like, I don't mind necessarily seeing some of these matchups earlier on because you get scope for upsets and you get all of these different kinds of things like Bayern PSG. I guess the heavy favourites are still going to be Bayern, but what a storyline if PSG can go through. They've just knocked out probably the favourite to win the whole thing. Or Bayern have been pretty much the favourite for most of the time. Maybe it's City now. Who knows? I'll ask you in a moment. But I guess currently, you can just sort of get anything happening at any time.
Yeah, and look, I think the article was kind of posing the question that City and Bayern are clearly the two best teams in Europe at the moment. And there's no chance that they can meet in a final. It will be a semi-final if they meet each other. But I sort of agree that that's sort of unfair. But that's the way football works. Football's never been fair. It's not part of the game. You don't get the stories like Liverpool winning the 2005 Champions League if football was fair. I think Liverpool were like 10th or 11th in the league, and they got a quite easy run to the final, and then they played the best team in Europe and beat them in the final after being 3-0 down. Like, you don't get those stories if it's a seeded pool. So I think it's all part of football, is the narrative that comes with these ties that aren't finals, that are the biggest games.
And that's what I was sort of saying before, Damo. You've just touched on another thing that, like, you just never know. Some of these teams, like, and that's why I'm particularly interested in the Real Madrid-Liverpool fixture, not only because I'm a Liverpool fan, but also because they're two teams that have got a lot of street cred in Europe, but they're both just not at their peak in terms of their league performances and results at the moment. This might be Liverpool's best chance to qualify for the Champions League next season, to win it. But they both seem to just have this gear that they can go to in Europe, no matter how they're doing in their own domestic league. So I just find that to be such an interesting matchup for that reason.
Yeah.
But that just turns us on to the ultimate question, though, boys. Who's going to take away the whole thing now? We've got 8 teams to go. Shannon, who do you think's going to win the thing?
I'm going to say Porto, purely for the fact that if they win it, we can like clip that out and people will think I'm some kind of football prodigy. But realistically, I think PSG. I think if they beat Bayern, the pressure's on them to win it. PSG, the pressure is on them to win it big time. And considering how poorly they've done in the league so far this season, they might turn their full focus to the Champions League. And yeah, let's see what PSG are really made out of.
It feels like just it feels like the last chance they have to win it before things. I know we've been saying this for like years about PSG. Like, every time they start to go on a run, we're like, this is it. This is the last chance they have to win it. And then like they'll buy Neymar or like something like that. So, but yeah, this does feel like if they do get past Bayern, then that's a very favourable run home. Damo?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say I reckon City are going to win it. I just the way City are playing in the Premier League and the way they've been performing in Europe, I think they've conceded the fewest amount of goals by this stage, a second fewest amount of goals by this stage in Champions League history. They've their defensive record in the Premier League is just, I think the second or third best by this stage. So, like, and then they've got so many like outlets going forward, and to think they've got Sergio Aguero, who has barely played in the last 12 months, and I think he scored his first league goal in like 400 days or something ridiculous just last weekend or the weekend before. So, if you got Sergio Aguero who's coming back into the squad, and this squad's already dominating everyone, I just feel like this is finally the year City can do it, and then Guardiola can leave and say, look how good I am. He'll go to another ready-made squad to win trophies.
But if City don't win, think of the memes.
Yeah, I know. That's going to be great. Either way, I'm so excited.
The quarterfinals will take place on the 7th and 8th of April, first leg anyway, and then wrapping up on the 14th and 15th of April. And we'll, of course, be here to cover it on the pod. But that will do it for us today. Thanks again, everyone, for listening. If you've enjoyed the pod today, we'd love it if you could give us a shout out or recommend us to a mate, or, I don't know, just get in our DMs and tell us you love us. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or subscribe to our YouTube channel at any time. The links to all of those social media accounts are in the notes to this podcast. Next week, match day 30 of the Premier League and A-League match week 14. Until then, enjoy the football.